Good morning. Today I invited Bruce Sterling, and Bruce invited a good friend of his, Scott Clinker, to come talk to us about SPIMES, the Internet of Things, and how they're working on designing this stuff and making it work. Of course, I think everybody knows Bruce. He's author, journalist, blogger, and futurist, if I can read my handwriting. Scott's head of 3D design at Cranbrook Academy of Art, which is where some famous designers have come out, like Charles Eames and some others. Worked at IDEO for a couple of years, worked at Ericsson before it was Sony Ericsson, taught some stuff in Japan, and the Cranbrook guys actually are famous for actually making things real, not just designing stuff. So they're going to talk about that today. So without that anymore, have Bruce come up and start.
Right, so thanks for showing up today. Pleasure to visit your justly famed Google campus. So I came here with two things. I have a design theory about computers, and I also have a personal problem as a science fiction writer. So, first, the theory, of course. Well, I was asked to write a little visionary book, which I did. I don't know if you've seen this. It came out in 2004. This is kind of my grand visionary scheme about computers and their role in our society and networks and what they're good for and so forth and so on. When it comes to computers and networks and visionaries, there have been kind of surprising numbers of these grand theories. I like to call them meta-histories, little meta-histories. Sort of grand, foggy, theoretical notions about the true nature of the computational enterprise. And they always fall short or they get fulfilled in various interesting ways. And then it's back to the drawing board, or back to what they used to call a drawing board, because, of course, we don't actually use drawing boards anymore. But you could draw some quick sketches of these sort of grand theoretical schemes by summarizing them, kind of the bumper sticker method. And I want to run through a few of these today to sort of put my own notion into some historical perspective. So, if you're going to do some futurist prediction about computers and networks and what they're doing, you can summarize them the way you'd summarize a crime scene, right? I mean, why do crimes happen? Why does anything happen? Well, they happen because of means and motive and opportunity, right? I mean, there's a way how stuff happens, and that's the means. And there are things that we imagine that computers might be good for, and there are things that computers are actually good for. Those would be the motives. Periodically, we have to reassess those things because computers keep changing, and so do our ideas about them. And then there's motives, which is why things happen. The various things that need doing to maintain a civilization, stuff like supplying electrical power and sewage. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that doesn't actually need doing, but it's the kind of thing people actually do in real life, like sending spam messages. Sometimes we meet some large and serious needs with our computers, and most of the time we just sort of screw around in our short-term can-do way that happens to get rewarded in some fashion. So then there's what happens, which is the opportunities, means, motives, opportunities. These are conceivable things moving into the realm of doable things, something I find of great interest as a journalist and a novelist. New things disrupting the installed base. Means, motives, opportunities. That's pretty simple. Even though the world's full of unsolved mysteries and nobody really predicts the future. My scheme, which came out in this book, you can see it in my Flickr set. There's like YouTube videos of me ranting about it. Something I've been talking about since 2004, not hard to find. Let me just try to place it in context by listing and describing some rival schemes. Now, the grandfather of this bunch would be the original scheme of Vannevar Bush, as described in his famous magazine article from 1945, Atlantic Magazine, As We May Think. Published it just as World War II was ending. The means is what Vannevar Bush called the mimics, which is a kind of analog desktop library. And the motive was accelerating scientific research through networks and hyperlinks. Really, you could look this up. Networks and hyperlinks, 1945. And the opportunity, or the upshot of Bush's predictions, was Bush's establishment of the National Science Foundation, what Bush called Science, the Endless Frontier. The NSF net, That wasn't too many years away from his original concept of the MEMX. Visionary theories about computers go, we can call that one a major success. One of the most brilliant acts of technical forecasting ever. Okay, then there was J.C.R. Licklider's thesis of 1960, one of the founders of the net. The means human-computer symbiosis. Yes, enhanced human bodies, enhanced artificial intelligences, meshing together into a cyborg supermind. Yes, the motive, creating an internet, the intergalactic internet, he called it, to link machines together so that they could be linked directly to the human mind. And the opportunity was creating cyborg scholars for the Pentagon. Okay, that scheme did not exactly work out. I mean, nowhere near so well as Bush's ideas, but we did get the ARPANET from it. You know, it wasn't brilliant forecasting, but it turned out to be a very fertile mistake, right? So often these schemes aren't written out in so many words. They're kind of techno-folklore, really. For instance, if you read popular period books from the 1950s and 1960s that talk about thinking machines, very commonly, they predict a fully planned economy, basically a kind of cyber socialism. Why? So that mankind can explore the moon and the planets. Like, well, wait a minute, what do thinking machines actually have to do with space flight or going into space? Well, very little really, except that a lot of the guys who were working in California on early computers were also aeronautics guys. I mean, there's just a lot of bleed over between the engineering cadres. And besides, if you had talked to somebody at the time, it was obvious that computing was the highest technology we had, and rocket ships were the highest technology we had. So the highest technology we have has to help the highest technology we have. It just seems obvious. Well, it was a period notion. In the spirit of that times, it was obvious. History passes. It seems odd to us. Right? Other means. Virtual reality. Motives, spiritual transcendence. The upshot, a psychedelic society. Only not really. Maybe Warcraft and Second Life. That's what you might get. The means, email and Netscape. The motives, commercial disintermediation, point, click, and ship. The upshot, internet stock boom. The means, artificial intelligence. The motive, auto-designed super AIs. The upshot, a singularity. The end of history. The means, open source instructables. The motives, popular mechanics and popular programming. The upshot, cyber arts and cybercrafts. The means, military command control, communications, computers, and intelligence. The motive, battle space awareness. The upshot, destroying enemy armies. Mission accomplished. All right, now the newer schemes, are a little harder to describe because we lack historical perspective on them. They haven't become silly yet. The means, Wikipedia. The motive, free knowledge. The upshot, world enlightenment. The means, real-time locative systems. The motive, global geolocation. The opportunity, a city of bits. The means, search engines. The motive, publish everything first, then search the net for it. The upshot, old publishing hierarchies turn into new publishing hierarchies with the power law distribution of Google juice. The means, computer fabricators. The motives, fabricators that can fabricate fabricators. The upshot, a corn-utopia. All right, well, in real life, you don't actually get single brilliant technologies which work in splendid isolation. It's kind of easier to think about them that way, but we know now that that's not the way the world actually works, so instead we tend to get grab bag theories like Web 2.0. And the means of Web 2.0 is a whole bunch of stuff. It's tagging, perpetual beta, granular addressability, page rank, user content, long tail, cheap scalability, open APIs, web as a platform for development, Ajax, Ruby, P2P networks, human collective intelligence. That's just part of it. And sometimes these factors seem to work together smoothly, and sometimes they kind of obviously clash. But the motive is a new kind of web that feels different to users and developers. And the opportunity, revenge of the boom. It's user bubbles instead of investor bubbles. So, which brings me to this scheme that I described in a bunch of conference speeches in this book that I wrote. And my means are CAD/CAM computer-aided design, plus RFID, plus fabs, plus tracking, plus searching, plus recycling, plus an ever-growing pool of metadata. And the motive is a historical transition to a society that is high-tech but also environmentally sustainable. And the upshot is an Internet of Things. An Internet of Things that I call SPIMES. SPIMES are the kind of thing that is the native to an Internet of Things. They are Internet metadata objects. They're mostly metadata and occasionally they're physical. That's what a SPIME is. And it's a future world, a visionary future world, based in present-day technologies. There's no artificial intelligence in it. There's no machine intelligence of any kind. There's no ubiquity. There are no virtual realities, no augmented realities. It's about reality. It's about stuff. It's basically what we have now, right now, but writ larger and linked up and bent to solving our worst problem, which is that the way we run industrial society can't go on. It's not physically possible. It's not sustainable. And that's a pretty severe problem, a really severe problem. I can promise you it's going to get a lot more severe. We're on a slider bar between the unthinkable, which is the consequence of doing nothing, and the unimaginable, which is trying to dream up stuff that will actually work. And I'm trying to shove that slider bar into the direction of our imagining new things that are hard to describe but might conceivably actually function. Now, I often use the expression, you can Google your shoes in the morning, to try and make it clear to people there would be some major advantages to having an Internet of Things. But that's just my bumper sticker. The key to my SPIME scheme is that, unlike all previous visionary computer schemes, this one concerns sustainability. You know, it's a little hard to imagine that we could practically use computers and networks to achieve sustainability. It's a little like saying that thinking machines will get us into outer space. But I argue in my book that there's likely no other practical way to do it. We've tried many other methods, gotten not very far at all with sustainability. We do have severe global environmental problems that need to be addressed at very high speed. And computer and network technologists are highly inventive, and they may be moving fast enough to make a big dent in that crisis. Maybe. So, I was this visionary in a design school, and I was commissioned to write this visionary manifesto for MIT Press, which I did, and I'm happy about my book, and I'm glad to brag about it. It went into a second printing, and the reviews were kind. And now you see stuff like this. I happened to buy this in Munich on the way over. This is The Economist doing their little Internet of Things pitch here, the sort of latest issue. It's a 16-page report on the coming wireless revolution, and it's quoting Adam Greenfield, the author of Everywhere, and it's got some nice ambient findability riffs. And, you know, it's like 3 years after I did my little piece here. It's sort of like hitting the conventional business press, and I feel that's kind of the right place to be, and I'm kind of thrilled about that. But as I mentioned earlier, I have a problem. I have kind of a severe personal problem here, because I'm not just this guy who writes about design, and I'm also not a tech journalist. I have also tried to write novels. And you know, as a design visionary, I'm kind of happy to make things up, and you know, that's kind of groovy, and my schemes, I think, makes a certain kind of sense. It's not particularly difficult to understand. You can look at a little flow chart of it, and you can just sort of say, well, this is like product-lifecycle management, only kind of like amped up by a factor of 10. And how hard could that be? Not hard to do. You know, and as a journalist, I'm a cynic, of course. So then I look at the scheme like mine, and I think, oh, well, the installed base will never let that happen. There's going to be all kinds of IP problems, and the devil's in the details, and who's going to manage the routers, and what about the privacy issues, and so forth and so on. But then as a novelist, I have a more severe problem, which is like making this stuff work on the page. I mean, what's it like to wake up in an Internet of Things? It's not enough to say, you can Google your shoes. You know, I mean, it has to actually make a difference, and I have to describe it in some way which is vaguely plausible and just isn't full of hokum. Now, I'm a journalist, and I'm a design critic, and I'm a novelist, but man, I'm not a designer, and I'm not even a technologist. In fact, I have very few skills there. So when I ask myself things, when I wrote this treatise, I was unable to think well enough about the user interface. How do people actually deal with this? I mean, suppose it comes true. I mean, what's it like on a daily perspective? How do you relate to it? How do users relate to the system? How do they see it? How do they guide it? How do they judge whether it's working properly or not? This vast recycling spime wheel of virtual design, identity tags, fabrication, tracking, searching, recycling, pools of historical metadata. All these things I went to such pains to kind of describe. How does that work? I mean, is it in your hand? Is it on your head? You could draw a flow chart that shows it working in an abstract sense, but what happens? I mean, how do you describe what happens when you walk into a room full of the Internet of Things and you fire up some things? Do you log on? What? I mean, how do you do it? What is it? What does it look like? Is it like an Apple iPhone? Like the mobile remote control for reality? Maybe it's a head-mounted heads-up display, like with, spectacles, glasses, laser things on the retina. Maybe it's one of these new skull-mounted cognitive devices that sort of reads brain waves and somehow slots them into whatever you're looking at. Maybe there are regional versions of it or scalable versions. I mean, it's about a real internet which has real 3D dimensions, so maybe you get not just everywhere, but like bodyware, roomware, buildingware, cityware, nationware, globalware. How do you tell those levels apart, if they exist at all? Now, you'd think that it would be a simple matter for a sci-fi writer to just sit down and make something up. I mean, how hard can that be? Just make it up, just pull it out of your hat. But I've now learned enough about interface design and experience design and human factors design, et cetera, that I know you just can't wave your hands at it. It's actually really hard work. Now, the closest we have to SPIMES today is something that software engineers call product-lifecycle management. I just came back from a conference of these guys. PLM, they call it. Please liberate me. Man, does that stuff suck. I mean, it's so bad. I mean, this is sort of the hardware for the Internet of Things as we understand it, product lifecycle management. It's so bad that engineers were confessing to me that they spend 90% of their time acting as software clerks for product lifecycle management systems and maybe 10% of the time engineering. Now, that prospect doesn't actually bother me. That's not a tragedy. I'm sure that engineers will be software jockeys for as far as the eye can see. That's just a given. But they don't like the design of product lifecycle management. Please liberate me. Right. I think that's a legitimate plea. The world needs a PLM. It needs product lifecycle management that is liberating. It needs a system of manipulating, using, buying, selling, manufacturing, recycling physical objects that empowers people in the way that Google empowers people. We really need some product lifecycle management that isn't evil. I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, I've been working on it a long time, trying to work it on the page. It's just very difficult. I want to know how it feels and what it means. I need help. I generally get help from designers because they can design and I can't. So I want to now introduce you to my colleague, Scott Clinker here, who actually helped me with my book, Shaping Things, some time ago. He works for Cranbrook School of Design, a place where I go sometimes. He has a presentation to make. I think he can help me. I hope you can help him help me. Thank you for your attention. And thanks for the T-shirt, too. Hey, been there, done that. Got the T-shirt.
Hi, good morning. So when I learned about Bruce's ideas, I was very, very excited. And I run a graduate design program. I have about 16 graduate students. We're in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, north of Detroit. And we're really focused on trying to give form to experimental cultural ideas. So when we heard about Bruce's ideas, we're very excited about it, and we can help him to visualize his visionary ideas, and we will. But we were also thinking that it would be much more interesting if we could get Google involved in it, because it seems like it would be very much a win-win situation for everyone, because thematically it really fits with Google. And we could, as we put together a project would be much more informed by Google knowledge and creativity in the process too. So we would like to talk about some kind of collaboration between Bruce and the school and Google. But I wanted to show a little bit about what we do at Cranbrook. This is just a shot of the campus. It's actually more beautiful than the Google campus, I'd have to say. But you have a great campus here. So we call what we do narrative research in design, and we're looking at the way that, in the old days, product design was really about shaping an object, but these days, product design, of course, as we all know, is much more involved than that, bringing together aspects of image, object, experience, and story. So we're looking at these interrelationships that begin to ultimately tell a story. And we're looking at other aspects of culture, like gaming and Hollywood, these areas. This is really one of our major cultural exports in America, and we're looking at these for inspiration on how to tell stories and how that begins to integrate with ideas about product. Of course, the fashion world has used storytelling for a long time to encourage consumers to make emotional choices about product. But here, physical things and stories are very much integrated. And Bruce and I last night were talking about this idea of augmented reality, or ways that storytelling intersects with the physical world. This is a cell phone that was produced by Samsung that was originally a prop from the movie The Matrix. So just this idea about this interplay between the physical and the virtual, I think from a design perspective, is a very powerful idea. And who better represents that interplay between the physical and the virtual than this guy? So we could think of product design as, or the product itself as a story container. It goes out into the world through a story network, and we can think of the designer as a storyteller. I like this quote. This quote kind of sums it up. Unlike the more or less ephemeral media, design has the capacity to cast myths into an enduring, solid, and tangible form so that they seem to be reality itself. So that really sums up this idea of taking ideas and portraying them in a way, or basically just physicalizing them, so that your ideas or a story enters into the world in a very tangible way. So with the students, of course, we're talking about these ideas and creating methods around them, but really it comes down to what story as a designer, what story you're interested in telling. And we're finding that one of the most important stories that as a profession in industrial design, but also I think as a society in general, of course, sustainability is on everyone's mind. And how we craft that story and how we provide a vision to people about what that might look like is really important. I think that's what Bruce is trying to do with his book. And there's a lot of theories out there, a lot of ideas about sustainability, but there are really very few portrayals of what that's really going to feel like. And I think that's what we want to do with Bruce. We want to look at some of his ideas about SPIMES and bring them to life through a design portrayal. So what some of the students are doing now, we've called Speculative Futures, where some of them are looking at the values of technology. For example, this camera sticker by Celine Lee, which is basically a webcam that is portrayed as a sticker. It's a working webcam, but it's really announcing itself through a strong graphic that could be applied anywhere. And she was looking at what would a society look like that had these eyeballs everywhere, and what kind of emotional impact would that have on people, and how would that affect people's behaviors. This is kind of a funny one based on a paradox by Sung-Pyo Hong, who's a Korean student who came to America, and one of his first reactions to American culture was, wow, Americans are really big. And at the same time, well, he saw on the television there's a constant push for consumption, sort of, eat more, pay less, but at the same time, everyone's supposed to look like a supermodel. So he designed the external stomach, which is a kind of critical commentary, I suppose. And the proposal is that the external stomach would allow you to overeat but not get fat. So it's a critical proposal. Kit Tech by Carter Wong. This has to do with fabbing or 3D printing at home. So looking at a future where we'll have 3D printers at home. You can print your own electronics at home, download a product, print it out at home. In this case, a cell phone. So I think this came out of his desire to get rid of clients. He was looking for a future where he could be able to offer his products online himself. Interaction. This is this cell phone by Mia Lee is where most electronics are moving in the direction of miniaturization. She wanted to look at an idea of how the interface could become more bodily, have a different physical relationship to it. Reality Games by Shanshan Lee is a geolocative, you could call it a video game. She wanted to get kids out from in front of the tube and get them out exploring the world. So she created, you could call this another augmented reality, where the idea is that you could, she created a narrative, a story that is basically a scavenger hunt that's based on location-specific information delivered to your cell phone. So based on a GPS location, in this case, on the Cranbrook campus, you would go to a certain point on the Cranbrook campus and you would be given a clue to a narrative that would send you to the next place on campus. And so a story unfolds, and as you're also exploring the physical space. So the same kind of idea could be used to explore New York or Tokyo, for example. Scenario building is a strong tool that we use, and something that we'll be using in working with Bruce. But this is a project called The Day Computers Enter the Body by Sung-Pyo Hong, and it gives you a sense of what we go through with storyboarding. So in this scenario, you would inject software and hardware into your body, and then an augmented reality interface would pop up. So she's setting her preferences here, and then also a virtual butler shows up on her shoulder, and then this begins to look at what the experience might feel like in an augmented reality, or it transitions between augmented reality and virtual reality, but what that might physically look like. So there's some sophisticated storyboarding going on here. And then, as a result of that, of creating that narrative, the student also goes back and creates props, or basically product proposals. These are antennas that the characters in his narrative would use that would transmit the computers for their computers inside their bodies. And this is a 3D print of the butler, and creating the hardware that would inject the software into the body. The evil hardware. And this is the student's thesis presentation with all of these elements working together. So what we would like to do with Bruce is to create a speculative documentary that would take some of his ideas, turn them into scenarios, and basically create a video documentary that would portray a fictitious future, perhaps with several short chapters for different kinds of ideas about SPIMES that could be downloaded. It would all be net-based. Could go on YouTube, and basically it is to take these ideas, put them out there on the net to inspire discussion across different disciplines. And of course, since the ideas are very systemic, they cross over lots of different disciplines like product design, software, manufacturing, sustainability, social issues. And a good model for this would be Apple's Knowledge Navigator that was done, I think, back in the late 80s or 90s. But that's a good example of how they took a lot of ideas and put it into excuse me, a scenario or a story that made it that integrated a lot of ideas into something that was that you could actually feel as a story rather than sort of intellectualizing it. Of course, we'd make it much more cool than the Knowledge Navigator. And then, of course, what's in it for Google? I mean, I think what Bruce is proposing is a whole new paradigm about integrating ideas about information into physical products. So, of course, there'll be lots more stuff to search, and we could think of it as R&D, thinking about new markets, new applications, new knowledge and ideas, and also brand building, where Google can begin to explore new ideas about their sustainable point of view. Some potential resources for this is right now, I mean, I really don't have a format for it, but we're thinking, well, we'd like to talk to people at Google about what kind of interest or what kind of ambition they would have in trying to support it with money and knowledge. But I was thinking that we could have a concept scenario development team that would consist of Bruce and I and a group of designers and Google people, and then to generate concepts and then after that develop it with a video development team that would have a director, editor, director of photography. And it would basically have a planning stage that would be similar to any kind of Hollywood production, I suppose. So that's the invitation, and we would like to continue talking to anyone at Google that would be interested in working with us. I think it's a very exciting project. So thanks for your time this morning.
So so people can ask questions, but it's going to be up on Google Video, so it's all public, so nothing proprietary. Okay.
Like you're in a deep need to ask proprietary questions of science fiction novelists. Nevertheless, this to me is like a really exciting notion. It's just, it's odd. I mean, because you're in science fiction and you do a lot of this stuff, and quite frequently you can like write a book instead of see it become a film, or it sort of moves into a graphic novel, something along that line. We're all on the same page now. It's like we're all on the internet. It's not about sort of the ink-stained rich sitting there typing and sending it off to the publisher. We're just, I don't know. To me, it seems like a new potential era for a weird kind of cross-boundary creativity. You can sort of see it happening every day. It would break a lot of my log jams, I think. It's just sexy. Anyway, so do we have some questions? Has anybody here actually read my book, the Little Shaping Things book? Yeah? Well, one noble soul there. It says a lot of nice things about designers. Not enough about interface issues. You ever seen a book called Everywhere by Adam Greenfield? Heard of that? Or a book called Ambient Findability by Peter Morville? These are the books that people buy on Amazon when they buy my books. I didn't know these guys before I published my book, but now there's like a little groundswell of kind of ubicomp theorist guys. We all come to know each other because we found each other on the web, so now we all go to the same events and look at each other's Flickr sets. I mean, one of us is an information architect, one of us is a website designer, one of us is, science fiction novelist. It's getting harder to tell the difference, ladies and gentlemen. Really, seriously harder. A question out there. Yes?
I'm curious as to how some of these ideas about the Internet of Things tie into sustainability. I guess the connection there is not obvious to me.
Right. Well, I think there's sort of three methods of Oh, right, yes. The question is, what the heck does the Internet of Things have to do with sustainability? I think there are three basic methods that have been proposed to do, a sustainable society where, objects don't pile up, don't pollute the environment. Okay, well, first of all, there's the sort of classic 19th century arts and crafts vision where you sort of make everything permanent. I mean, no planned obsolescence, no junk heaps, everything's very parsimonious, kind of a small is beautiful, fully recyclable, very agrarian society where most objects are either permanent or handmade. Okay, that's never worked. That's never gonna work for a whole bunch of different reasons, many of which is that society's not actually sustainable. It's too poor and too weak, and it knows too little about itself to survive. It's just too ignorant to pull through. An earthquake, an epidemic can wipe out a society like that. Okay, now the second scheme is to make everything biomimetic so that it actually rots when you're done with it. And, as a design theorist, I'm really interested in this. I mean, sure, you just get rid of all the chlorine and the kind of toxic chemicals, and, you make everything out of hemp and bamboo and coral and wood, and maybe you do a little genetic engineering, and kind of like cellulosic ethanol, run everything on bacteria and sugar cane. All right, that's a sexy idea, but I think it's about a century away. We can do certain things that are biomimetic. I've got a pair of like Nike Biomimetic shoes. I don't know if you've ever seen these. It's sort of Nike considered shoes. They're little running boots, but they're all organic. Okay, they rot. That's the problem. You put them on, they start rotting immediately. It's like, bread without preservatives gets moldy faster. So, I have these shoes. I can't really wear them because they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're compost on my feet, and they smell kind of odd. So I don't have a problem with that scheme. I just don't think it's entirely practical. There's just too many things that we can't make out of organic materials, right? So then we have this other scheme, which is sort of unique to the 21st century and plays to a lot of our strengths. It plays to stuff we're doing already, which is just to catalog the whole shebang. I mean, just search the living daylights out of it. You don't lose pollutants. You just watch them. You know, you put identity on them, you tag them, you follow them. Actually, you tag them before they exist. You don't manufacture anything that doesn't have an expressed consumer demand first. So that gets rid of a whole bunch of stored stuff right there. Then you like give every object a unique identity, you know, maybe an IPv6 or something, so that everything we make like exists. I mean, we can comment on it, we can annotate it, we can discuss it, we can say it's good or it's bad. Right? Then you track it so you know where it is on the planet's surface. You search it so you sort of know what the old model looked like, know what the new model looked like. You can design it a lot faster that way. You can obsolesce items more quickly. You can get rid of stuff. You're just more knowledgeable about it. And then you fold it back into the production stream when you're done with it. So it's just kind of a giant, ubiquitous computing Internet of Things method that allows us to put all our toys away so we don't leave broken glass on the beach. Right? I mean, that's why it's potentially a sustainable system. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sustainable system. And, you know, a major part of, in fact, it could be a devilish system that just sort of like multiplies our problems. You know, I mean, if you have a ubiquity, if you have an Internet of Things system which is not sustainable, you can create tremendous environmental havoc in very short order, which is why it needs a sort of lot of cultural engineering, right? And, you know, and my suspicion is that if this happens at all, it's going to take about 30 years. In other words, this isn't something that you're going to do in a couple of quarters. I would say that somewhere around, you know, 2037, maybe 2032, given that, you know, I was predicting it 3 years ago, you're going to wake up in the morning and realize that you're actually living in an Internet of Things. In other words, you can query every object you have. You don't lose your house keys, your shoes, anything else. I mean, practically every item that surrounds you has a Wikipedia entry. It's in Amazon.org. You go in and look at a loaf of bread in the morning if you want to query it. It's like people who eat this kind of raisin toast like to try other kinds of raisin toast. Have you ever tried your raisin toast with the orange juice? In other words, you know, the things that we have now, which are very clunky, kind of barely there, actually spread into physicality, right? So I've been like writing a science fiction novel on this subject for, gosh, must be 5 years now. And I've got chapters where people are trying different things. You know, it's an okay novel, but it's not good enough. It's not really good enough to actually change people's minds. It's still too comic booky, you know? It's not really getting a grip. You know, I need like professional assistance here. I need some actual genius, right? And not like novelistic genius, because hell, every novelist thinks he's a genius. But we're not genius designers, and we're not genius interaction people, and we don't really, I mean, we can't be all things to all people, but we can link to all people, you know, fast, and like, you know, and you know, you could do it in like 6 weeks and do just like prototype a bunch of stuff, and it's, you know, I mean, that's what I like about teaching design school. If you go teach creative writing, you tell people a lot about culture, and they sort of neatly write everything down. If you go to design school, you could tell people something, they try and prototype it. They just go out and attempt to do something. It's a gorgeous thing to see. It's very addictive. Another question there?
No, just a comment.
Right.
If you're trying to get people to explain designs, maybe you could post some kind of situation, a short story, for example, and then say, what kind of design would have worked better in this situation? Open it up for comments and get ideas that way.
Well, you know, I do that actually. I've got like I've got a mailing list, and like ViridianDesign.org. You can see me like struggling with these issues since 1988, and I've got like a blog, and yeah, I write a lot of stories. I got a story out in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction a couple of months ago. It's called Kiosk. It's about a guy in Eastern Europe who gets an outlaw fabricator, and you know, and he turns it into street technology. This is as close as I've come. You know, I mean, that story really is pretty well doing the kind of thing I would like, you know, my fiction to do. But I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's a big world-building project. And, you know, sure, I could start my own wiki and try and, you know, get people to do it, or I can actually sort of put some skin in the game and maybe they'll work really hard. You never know. It's worth an effort. Yes? Oh, by the way, if any of you would like to send me some email and suggest some brilliant, design interventions you have in mind, I'd be thrilled. By all means, bruces@well.com. I'm not hard to find. Google me, yeah. I'd be thrilled to hear from you. I need all the help I can get. Frequently this happens. It's what I call predicting the present. You can be a science fiction writer and you can talk about something you imagine and some guy says, I think we already have that, except that we call it something else. That's great. It means somebody's done all my work for me. Just terrific. You had your hand up there, so yes?
Maybe this is just a failure of imagination on my part, but I see this as your idea is two fairly different things. You have put RFID tags on everything so you can locate it and find it, which you can pretty much do right now, and it's kind of cool except for some privacy implications. And then you have the tie-in product lifecycle management, and before creation, and be able to create things from prototypes, which that technology is way far out and not as compelling. You don't see these as two things. You see them as one inextricably linked concept.
Yeah, I think they're all linked to the theme of sustainability, because if you have all these things, if you have a piece missing, you've got a problem. The fab thing, I admit, is kind of the weak link. It's just sci-fi writers who can't love fabs. Just the idea of you've got the model there, you press the F1 function key, thing pops out whole and steaming right out of the chute. It's a very sexy notion. It has some really nifty, sci-fi-ish kind of attitudes, everything box kind of thing. The scheme would work without fabs if you just made them in relatively normal, sustainable factories. It would work just as well. They're rap guys who believe in fabs that fabs. They're like nano fabbing guys who want to done it all with tiny invisible machines. I'm extremely familiar with these far out notions. The other 6 legs there of my sort of scheme, I think, are all necessary to actually reach a sustainable situation. And without it, you really have a sort of open-ended machine that just spews garbage faster. I could be proved wrong. In fact, I would say that historically speaking, it's very likely that such would be the case. I would also predict that if there were an Internet of Things, nobody would call it Internet of Things. It would be like calling something a horseless carriage. It would just be, I don't know what they'd call it, reality 2.0. It would be, the way we live now. It's kind of a unique problem, but you're ingenious people. If any company in the world would pitch in on a mad scheme like this, it would be you lot. Well, anyway. Any other comments there? Questions? Shocked and frightened interjections? Well, thanks for hearing us out. We enjoyed being here.